So thanks again for being here. If you joined during the meditation, really glad that you are with us tonight. And here we are on the cusp of a new year. That word kind of came up for me today, the cusp, this place of transition between two states. And the truth is that we are always on the cusp. We are always in a state or a place of transition, because our experience is constantly evolving. We're always being born. We're always in process. And this is beautiful, and it's also stressful depending on what's happening and our view of what's happening. And there's a beautiful teaching that comes from the Buddha's parinibbana, and the parinibbana is when he set down his body, when his body finally gave out at 80-something years old. And when he passed, a mighty God, it's said, intoned, Anicca vata sankara, upadavaya dhammino, upajitava nirujanti, desam vupasamo sukho. And those are Pali words. Pali is a beautiful language, and it's the language that the Buddha's teachings were written down in first. And those words mean all conditioned things are impermanent. Their nature is to arise and pass away. Knowing this, living in harmony with this, brings great joy. So living in harmony with the truth of impermanence, the truth of change, this cusp state of all things, brings happiness, brings joy. When I forget this truth and I think life should be one thing, I get into trouble because I forget to acknowledge and appreciate what is really here, what is really happening, the changing of everything around me and the changing of everything within me that I take to be solid. So my last talk was on the Eightfold Path, and I used the beautiful teaching from Hugh O'Neill. When I don't know what to do, I can practice the Eightfold Path. I can practice the way of awareness, the way of wisdom, the way of ethical integrity. So for those who weren't here that night, it's wise view and wise intention. These are the wisdom factors of the path. Wise speech, wise action, wise livelihood. These are the integrity factors, our relational factors. And then wise effort, wise mindfulness, and wise concentration. These are the awareness factors or the samadhi factors. And this is the Buddha's prescription, the elixir, the medicine for the pain and rub of being in a human body and trying to hang on so tight. Hanging on tight to what we want and hanging on to our belief that what we don't like should not be here. Hanging on to that idea that there is no cusp, or it's possible to live in a state where there's no transition, no change. Not living in harmony with that truth. All conditioned things are impermanent. Anicca vata sankara. And this is a relative truth. This is the truth of conditioned things, things made up of other things, things that exist because of, which is almost everything. Things like rivers and mountains and bodies and feelings and governments and relationships and boulders and those little helicopter things that, are on a dandelion when it's about to go to seed. And also my moment-to-moment experience of life is conditioned. All of these things is in a process of change, of birth, of growth, of maturity, of decay, of death, of passing away, changing form. And although all conditioned things are impermanent in a process of change on the cusp, the Buddha taught that there is also the unconditioned, which is another way of saying nibbana. And he speaks to the monks and he says, there is, monks, monastics, an unborn, unbecome, unmade, unconditioned, If monks there were not that, you could not know an escape from the born, made, become, and conditioned. But because there is, therefore there is an escape from the born, the become, the made, and the conditioned. And I find that a very beautiful teaching, and I won't say that I understand it experientially, because I don't. Maybe I've had, like you have, some glimpses of peace, some glimpses of relative stillness. Maybe there's a spiritual intuition that that's possible. But because so much of what the Buddha says is verifiable, that I can see in my practice, I have faith. I have faith in this place that the path is pointing, the further shore, this place where our practice is leading us, the culmination, the fruition of the Eightfold Path, the cure and the medicine for what ails us. And so I want to just focus a little bit on two places on the Eightfold Path tonight: right view and right intention. Sometimes we say right, or why it could be wise view and wise intention. Sometimes we say right view, right intention. It means the same thing. It means fitting or appropriate to the task. So intention is always appropriate for us to examine and practice with consciously. And at these cusp times, like today, there's a sort of built-in invitation to notice our intentions, to set or reset or renew or update how it is that we wish to live, to reconnect with what is really important to us. So some nourishment for thought and practice, and then we'll do an intention setting ritual together that I learned from Jack Kornfield. And wise or right view is understanding the Dharma. It's the first place on the Eightfold Path. Understanding the Dharma as much as we can in this moment through study, but particularly through practice and seeing for ourselves. Seeing the results of practicing the Noble Eightfold Path, seeing the Four Noble Truths, which I talked about last time. In other words, seeing and knowing how suffering arises and how it ceases. Seeing, and again I'll say, seeing or beginning to see. We're in process in our practice of right view, but seeing or beginning to see the mechanisms of our own pain and the pain in the world. And an integral part of that seeing is knowing that how we think, how we intend is powerful, because thought is the precursor of experience. So in the first two lines of the Dhammapada, this beautiful collection of verses of the Buddha that so many of us read before we read anything else in the Dharma, the very first two lines are these. All experience is preceded by mind, led by mind, made by mind. Speak or act with a corrupted mind, and suffering follows, as the wagon wheel follows the hoof of the ox. All experience is preceded by mind, led by mind, made by mind. Speak or act with a peaceful mind, and happiness follows like a never-departing shadow. And this is an integral part of that path factor of wise or right view. Stated really super simply, which is always what I like to do for myself. This moment conditions the next. This moment conditions the next. What I think now leaves its imprint on what I think next, or in how I act next. And it's incredibly powerful to notice that. We have leverage in this moment to notice our thinking and encourage the thinking that's in line with our highest values, and to question the truth of thinking that is limiting or separating or belittling or based solely on sensual desire, the desire for everything in the world to be how we want it and to look for our happiness there. We have a much greater possibility to experience happiness when we learn to encourage the good and the wholesome and the real in our own hearts and minds. And there's a very often quoted sutta in the Majjhima Nikaya. So the suttas are the teachings of the Buddha that were written down, oral tradition first, and then eventually written down within a few hundred years of the Buddha's passing, his parinibbana. And there are thousands of them. And out of those thousands, there's probably a few dozen that people go back to again and again and again. And one of them is Majjhima Nikaya number 19, and it's called Two Kinds of Thought. And I want to read part of it to you. So thus have I heard, on one occasion the Blessed One was living at Savatthi in Jeta's Grove, Anathapindika's park. And there he addressed the monastics thus, "Monastics, Venerable Sir," they replied, and the Blessed One said this: "Before my enlightenment, while I was still only an unenlightened bodhisattva, it occurred to me, suppose that I divide my thoughts into two classes. Then I set on one side thoughts of sensual desire, thoughts of ill will, and thoughts of cruelty, and I set on the other side thoughts of renunciation, thoughts of non-ill will, and thoughts of non-cruelty. As I meditated thus, diligent, ardent, and resolute, a thought of sensual desire arose in me. I understood thus, this thought of sensual desire has arisen in me. This leads to my own affliction, to others' affliction, and to the affliction of both. It obstructs wisdom, causes difficulties, and leads away from nibbana. When I considered, this leads to my own affliction, it subsided in me. When I considered, this leads to others' affliction, it subsided in me. When I considered, this leads to the affliction of both, it subsided in me. When I considered, this obstructs wisdom, causes difficulties, and leads away from nibbana, it subsided in me. Whenever a thought of sensual desire arose in me, I abandoned it, removed it, did away with it. As I meditated, thus diligent, ardent, and resolute, and he repeats the pattern, a thought of ill will arose in me, a thought of cruelty arose in me. And I understood them in the same way. He understood them in the same way. The thought of cruelty has arisen in me. This leads to my own affliction, the affliction of others and of both. It obstructs wisdom, causes difficulty, and leads away from nibbana. So what are these categories of thoughts again? So this is important because they become the second place on the Eightfold Path. Sammasankappa, or wise thought or intention. So the Buddha identifies thoughts of sensual desire, thoughts of ill will, and thoughts of cruelty or sort of a punishing attitude as the kind of thoughts or intention that lead to suffering, our own, the suffering of other beings, and ultimately to the suffering of the world. And the Buddha, who is describing, himself and his own practice, is by this point, someone who had already been practicing for a very long time. And so he's describing, he's already been practicing a very long time, but he still has these thoughts, and he still has to practice with them. So we're getting to see something really interesting here. We're getting to see how the Buddha himself practiced. So if we have these thoughts, these longings for sensual pleasures, these feelings of dislike or hate, these wishes for revenge or bad things to happen to our enemies, we are experiencing patterns of thought that the Buddha to be did as well, which I find sort of comforting. And so what does he do? What does the Buddha do? What's his practice? He brings mindfulness and investigation to them, these thoughts, as they arise, and he sees their tendency to create suffering, and he makes a conscious effort to abandon that sort of thinking, to let go of it. And he further in the same sutta says this about how we shape our mind and heart experience. Monastics, whatever one frequently thinks and ponders upon, that will become the inclination of their mind. whatever one frequently thinks and ponders upon, that will become the inclination of their mind. Does that seem to be true? I think that it's such a powerful thing to be aware of. What I fill my mind with tends to fill my mind. It sounds almost too simple to be noticed, and yet it's so profound. What I fill my mind with tends to fill my mind. It tends to condition the next moment. So it's really important. In what direction do I want to incline my mind? And then the Buddha continues teaching the monastics in this way. Just as in the last month of the rainy season in the autumn, when the crops thicken, a cowherd would guard his cows by constantly tapping and poking them on this side and that with a stick to check and curb them. Why is that? Because he sees that he could be fined or blamed if he let them stray into the crops. So too I saw in unwholesome states danger, degradation, and defilement, and in wholesome states the blessing of renunciation, the aspect of cleansing. As I meditated thus, diligent, ardent, and resolute, a thought of renunciation arose in me. I understood thus, this thought of renunciation, or we could say letting go, has arisen in me. This does not lead to my own affliction, or to others' affliction, or to the affliction of both. It aids wisdom, doesn't cause difficulties, and leads to nibbana. If I think and ponder upon this thought, even for a night, even for a day, even for a night and a day, I see nothing to fear from it. And then he repeats the same formula with a thought of non-ill will arising, a thought of non-cruelty. And so this is the practice of wise thought or intention, the second place on the Eightfold Path, to abandon thoughts and intentions of sensual desire, ill will, and cruelty, and to cultivate thoughts and intentions of renunciation or letting go, metta or love, and karuna or compassion. And we do this by paying mindful attention to our thinking, to our thoughts, knowing them, not fearing them, but cultivating the heart and mind like a garden, knowing what's a weed and will choke out the other plants, and knowing what is something that we want to let grow and flourish because it will nourish us and our relationships and our world. So Ajahn Amaro, who is a modern-day Buddhist monk, says letting go is the engine of liberation, or you could say renunciation. Letting go or renunciation is the engine of liberation. So in this practice, we're not seeking really to gain anything. Instead, we're seeking to let go of, to put at rest, to allow to fall away everything that obscures our own radiant nature, our innate wisdom, our worthiness. So what is this process of letting go? So sometimes it can be relatively clear, when we're really ready to let something go. We pay attention to our discomfort, or we see these thoughts of desire, ill will, or punishing attitudes, and it's like just relaxing the shoulders. Oh, I don't need this right now. And we're just ready to lay it down. I don't hate it, but I don't deny that it's here. I just loosen my attachment, my grasp. It's a natural movement. And this not hating it is so important, not blaming or shaming, knowing that the tension, the tangle is nature. It's just what's happening. And as we just saw, that the Buddha had these thoughts as well. And when I wake up to them, there's the opportunity to change course. And I may need to wake up to them many, many, many times before I'm ready to let go. To incline the mind and heart in the direction of freedom, and to cultivate these beautiful qualities of letting go, of love, of compassion. But in that letting go, there is an offering to the universe. It's like, I'm letting this go. May this energy be recycled into something beneficial. Ajahn Amaro again, if we don't let go, we don't make space to receive what is coming our way. And this is what the Buddha did, and this is our wise effort, letting go of what no longer serves. And so if letting go is the engine of liberation, so what is the engine of letting go? So to me it is the path itself. First of all, our mindfulness, what sometimes is called the universal solvent, paying attention with care, without judgment, with clarity, allows us to see and answer that question, what is this? What is it made of? How is it experienced in the mind and body and heart? And as the Buddha inquired, where does this lead? Does this lead to Nibbana? Does this lead to well-being? And then wisdom, wise view, wise intending, knowing the drawbacks of clinging to the unclingable, remembering that we don't have to cling, that we actually have the freedom and agency to cultivate thoughts and intentions of love and caring and letting go. And then this supports integrity on the path, the relational piece of wise speech and wise action and wise livelihood, these active practices of non-harming self and others, not adding fuel to the fire through our actions, just not wishing to, not engaging in behavior that tends to entangle me more in clinging. See it, know it, do no harm, let it be, let it fall away when it's ready. And intend the good, intend what's wholesome, intend what's health-giving. And when we let go through this practice, it's not like throwing something away or pushing it away or crushing it away. It's not a grand gesture, it's just that simple release, a gentle release, letting it fall if it's ready, but we're no longer holding on to it tightly. So I mentioned the wisdom part of the Eightfold Path earlier, wise view, wise intention. And wise intention is described very simply as renunciation, letting go, non-ill will, loving kindness, and harmlessness or compassion, these wholesome kinds of thought, the second category of thought that the Buddha made. So I can consider if my motivations and the actions that I take are in line with these qualities. Am I remembering my commitment to letting go, to kindness, to compassion? Am I in alignment with the path? And I may not always be, and I often personally get lost. And then I have the Buddha, I have the Dharma, I have the sangha to remind me, to point out this guiding constellation, that a place where I can have faith because of some experience, some of my own experience, and because of my faith in the teachings that lead me toward peace. So practice is never static because our experience isn't static. We are always on that cusp, always in a process of change and becoming. No matter how many times I get off track, no matter how many times I forget where I'm going or get distracted by old conditioning, I can always return to these intentions and to this path. And I remember the Buddha's teaching. I remember this one often. What we incline the mind toward becomes the inclination of the mind. Very simple, but very powerful. And the inclination of the mind becomes how we are in the world. It guides our actions and our relations. So, that we also hold our intentions gently, holding our intentions with a light touch, not trying to squeeze and crush the life out of them, but like a butterfly has landed on your palm, how beautiful, how much in awe am I of this moment and this beautiful intention, and can I give it wings, let it be what it wants to be, let it express itself beautifully. It's never worked for me to grab my intentions tightly and say, okay, it starts now, all or nothing. Now I'm changing completely. It's never all or nothing. It's always this slight pivot again and again and again, repeating that tendency toward the categories of thought, the second categories of thought, letting go and caring, compassion and love, and persistence in that, persistence in looking and inclining. So there's a forgiveness piece there too, forgiving ourselves again and again when we drop our intention or we forget our intention or we get distracted from our intention. We can always come back, always come back. And it's so important to come back again and again and again and to bring these intentions into the world, because this world needs them so much right now. And I just wanted to close with a little bit of a conversation that Krista Tippett, who has the beautiful podcast on being, she had a conversation with Daniel Harris, and he was talking about the TED Talk that she had recently given. And he was saying, it's really easy to look at the world and to think it's so damn messed up. And he said one of the pieces of advice that she had given in her talk was to tune into the generative story. And so he asked her, what did she mean by that? And this is more or less what she said. She said, tuning into the generative story, it's the opposite of destructive. What is life-giving and creative and worthy of aspiring to? And a lot of the story that gets told of our time that is real is what is catastrophic. And yet there's a whole story which also has in it that there are human beings everywhere, all around us, more than are setting out to make the world a worse place in the morning, who are doing their best, who are being forces for healing and kindness and social creativity, and feeling very alone in that. And that is a fiction. They are not alone. Those of us who are, and this is not about being perfect, those of us who are trying to lean into our humanity in the face of all this catastrophe are the majority. So thank you for being part of that majority and being willing to practice that for your own well-being and the well-being of the world. And so let's take a few moments to do this intention setting ritual. And there's Thich Nhat Hanh said, and I think it was kind of I kind of liked it. I like a lot of things Thich Nhat Hanh says, but this one was just a little waggish. He said, you can't have a new year if there isn't a new you, which I think is very appropriate, because if you don't change, it's the same old year, same old you, same old year. But we are always changing, but I just thought that was cute. So I want to ask you to just get quiet for a moment, and we'll do a ritual. We're on this cusp. It's a good time to set the intention of the heart for what matters to you, how you want to live, and what you want to bring into the world. So if you'd like to, and it feels comfortable, you can allow your eyes to close and just settling inward. And I wanted to, as you begin to contemplate, just offer these words from Martine Batchelor, who says, to make a vow is to set an aspiration. It is to ground our life in certain values. It is to trust our own potential or appeal to an outside power in which we believe. A vow states our intention and creates a current which we can flow toward and feed. We can renew and extend our vow. It's helpful if the vow is not too extraordinary, but at the same time helps us to stretch ourselves. So let's just be quiet for a minute or two and just see what vow there might be, what intention there might be that you'd like to hold for this year. Noticing if it is coming from a place of letting go, or a place of love, or a place of compassion, or maybe all three. What's alive in the heart? What wants to be expressed in action for you? And then I'd like to invite you, if you have one, if you brought one, to light a candle or bring your candle over to where you're going to write your intention. And just maybe if you're feeling mine or like mine, you're feeling the warmth of that and feeling a certain comfort and strength in that light and that warmth. And just placing it somewhere safe. And then taking out the piece of paper that you brought with you, if you did. And if we were all together, we might do a ritual and turn to one another and have someone witness our intention, because to speak them out loud gives them power. And we do need a witness, but we're on Zoom. So on your paper where you're going to write your vow or intention, at the top, write someone who will be your witness. And you can say, in the name of, and whoever it is, or whatever being is your inspiration. And it could be an ancestor, or it could be a loved one, or it could be Kuan Yin, or Nelson Mandela, or anyone that you can think of who inspires you and whose example lights you up. So in the name of Kuan Yin, or whoever it is, I set this intention, or take this vow. And so let's do that right now. Okay. And maybe taking 30 seconds or so to finish what you're writing, and if there's more, you can add to it later. And if you've finished, maybe just reviewing what you've written. And then when you're ready, we can all unmute if we'd like, just if you'd like. And just unmuting yourself. And what we'll do is we'll all at the same time offer our intentions. And so it won't be like we're just hearing one person at a time. We're just offer these together. So ringing the bell for each one of us here this evening and honoring our beautiful intentions and our loving hearts. And then you can take this paper and put it someplace where you'll see it, maybe on your altar, or maybe you have a Dharma book that you're reading, or a special book, and maybe using it as a bookmark. But seeing if you can reflect on this intention from time to time and let it be your gift to yourself. And to close tonight, I wanted to offer sort of a blessing for our practice, just a short one. But first, just really feeling the beauty of all of us caring enough to care for ourselves and to care for our world. May the inclining of our hearts and minds toward the wholesome, the generous, the noble, toward unlimited love and goodwill be for the benefit of all sentient beings. May this offering of our collective practice ripple endlessly outward without boundary or obstruction, including all beings in its embrace. May all beings know peace. May all beings be free. So, dear ones, see you in the new year. Thank you for your presence and your practice and your beautiful intentions, and may they come to complete fruition. So, take care, everyone.